More on Tony Abbott's trip in Asia and also the rest of the day's political events and issues with our political panel. We've got Graham Perrett, Labor MP, joining us from our Brisbane studio, and also Michael Sukkar, a Liberal MP, in our Melbourne studio. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to play to you, first of all,
Tom,
a bit of a grab at Tony Abbott speaking over in China a short time ago at an economic forum. Have a listen.
China, after all, has taken to heart Deng Xiaoping's advice that to get rich is glorious. And China should be richer still, thanks to Premier Lee's reforms. To be rich is indeed glorious, but to be a true friend is sublime. Australia is not here in China to do a deal, but to be a friend.
Some interesting rhetoric from the PM there, Michael Sukkar. Your thoughts? Is it truly glorious to be rich?
Well, Tom, what I think the PM was really trying to emphasise, and we have been emphasising since we formed government, is that trade liberalisation is something that has driven wealth creation for many nations around the world. And in Australia, we've been very fortunate ourselves, and I give credit where it's due on both sides of politics, in pursuing a trade liberalisation agenda. And as the PM pointed out rightly, in China, millions of people have been dragged out of poverty because of the policies that their government has undertaken to ensure that they have wealth creation. They have embraced capitalist tendencies in their economy. So I think it was a fairly self-evident point by the PM, and it just highlights that breaking down trade barriers is not only good for first world nations like Australia and our major trading partners that are in similar positions, but also our emerging markets in Asia and our entrenched trading partners such as China, South Korea and Japan.
Graham Perrett, when Tony Abbott said during the election campaign that Syria was a case of baddies versus baddies, there was a lot of noise from Labor saying he couldn't handle the complexities of the foreign trips in particular and foreign affairs. So far on this trip, he's managed to stitch up this deal with Japan and also have a deal on defence technology. At the same time, the Chinese appear happy. They're having some high-level talks about security arrangements as well with Australia. It seems like a pretty good balance considering the tension in the region at the moment.
Oh yeah, look, full marks to the Prime Minister for getting some of these long-term processes, bringing them to a head. I agree with Michael, we are a trading nation. We need to do all that we can to trade with those emerging groups in Chinese society and Indian society and that Asian region, as articulated in our Asian Century paper. Obviously, Rule 101 is keep Tony Abbott away from anywhere controversial like Syria, but if we can do that, it's probably good for our farmers, or some of our farmers. I sit here in Queensland, and if you go from Warren Inch down to Warren Truss, every LNP MP is furious about the way that sugar industry was treated in that Japan deal. But leaving that aside, I give the PM a bit of a tick for signing off on a long-term process that should be to the benefit of Australia.
You said to keep the PM away from anything controversial. Japan, China has been. We saw the pretty strong rebuke to the Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, but you'd have to say, yeah, Graham Perrett, the noises out of this trip so far, things are back on track, aren't they?
Well, look, in terms of the trade negotiations, I am yet to see the details of anything that we sign off on China. I noticed the comments from the analyst at ANU. Personally, I always thought that you shouldn't have foregrounded what your timeline was to sign off on a deal. I still think that could be a recipe for grabbing political damage, overpowering a economic advantage or a market advantage for sectors of our society, sectors of our industries that want to get on board with the China deal. Now, obviously, China's an emerging nation. You've got a communist control of a capitalist system, so there's some opportunities there and some challenges, but obviously as those hundreds of millions of people in rural China move towards prosperity, there's great opportunities for Australian farmers, even Australian manufacturers and Australian miners, and obviously more importantly those higher level skills that we have in terms of managing funds, in managing providing services. We can compete with the rest of the world, and every opportunity should come with a China free trade deal.
Michael Sukkar, there was plenty of reaction to do with this Japan deal. We don't know the full details yet, but a little bit underwhelmed at the lack of progress, if you like, on reducing some of these tariffs. In hindsight, the fact the Australian car industry is going to go, and that was announced under the Coalition's watch, did that take away a big bargaining chip with Korea and Japan? Because reducing tariffs on cars, I mean, that's going to happen anyway in the future, isn't it?
Well, I mean, Tom, I think we have got unprecedented access to the Japanese and the South Korean markets now. So even though there will be some people who wish we could have gotten further, look at the former Trade Minister, Craig Emerson, who said that this was the best deal possible, and well done to Andrew Robb. So given that Mr Emerson is now relatively impartial, I think that was a good indication. As far as the access to agriculture also, I just think it's worthy to say that we now have greater access to agricultural exports into South Korea and Japan than any comparable nation. Now, in any negotiation, of course, both sides will walk away wishing they could have pushed a bit further on one point or another, and that's just the nature of any type of free trade agreement or economic partnership agreement in the case of Japan. But if you look at some of the front ending of the reduction in tariffs, so with respect to beef, a halving of the tariff and more than half of that reduction being in the first 2 years, I think we've pushed very hard. We've achieved a great outcome for a number of areas: beef, wheat, wine and many others. So I understand that many people in various industries would wish that an agreement could push a bit further in one area or another. But in totality, we've been able to achieve in the first 7 months something that the former government couldn't do in 6 years. So for 6 years, agricultural exporters were unable to get access, and now they will have access. Thanks, Tom.
Michael, if you're suggesting that happened in 7 months, you're dreaming, mate. Fair income. These processes go for years and years and years.
Agreed, Graham, and that's why I point to the comments from your former Trade Minister, who said this was the best agreement that we could have struck. And I think you'd be good to heed some of his comments, given that he was obviously intimately involved in these negotiations previously.
Definitely, he did the heavy lifting. He did all the heavy lifting. I concede that, of course, a lot of groundwork was done. But what the Prime Minister and our Trade Minister have signalled to the region is that we have a commitment to conclude agreements without giving up the interests of Australian industries and Australian consumers. Unless it's the sugar industry or the rice industry,
we are going to have to go
on. Yeah.
Sorry, Graham Perrett. We'll end on that bipartisan note of sorts that you both agreed. Both parties were involved there. We'll go to a quick break. Back with more on Lunchtime Agenda after this.
We love your projects. Your big paint projects, your little paint projects. We're Inspirations Paint Stores and we want to help. Right now, for every $100 you spend in-store at Inspirations Paint, you'll get a $20 voucher for your next project. Spend $200 and get $40 worth of vouchers. Spend $300 and get $60 worth of vouchers. One good project deserves another at Inspirations Paint.
What's your next project?
What happened to me was wrong. It had a big impact. I couldn't work, and soon our house was on the line. Our lives were being crushed. Shine Lawyers really helped. They listened to me and made things easy to understand. They got everything I was entitled to, and that's why our lives are back on track.
Putting things right. That's where we shine. Call Shine Lawyers on 13 11 99 or visit shine.com.au.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to California.
Say hello to fresh Eclipse mints.
Come on, make some noise. Here it comes. 1, 2, 3, go!
You bought a Jeep.
Yeah, I bought a Jeep.
We're going to need a bigger boat.
Welcome back to Lunchtime Agenda. We've got Labor MP Graham Perrett with us today, as well as Liberal MP Michael Sukkar. Graham Perrett, I'll go to you on jobs. Now, we've seen a surprise fall in the unemployment rate today from 6 to 5.8%. This is not really going to play into a lot from what we've heard from Bill Shorten lately, is it? Up on the soapbox about jobs and jobs going under the Abbott government. Is the reality that job creation is going on, albeit a lot more quietly than the job losses?
Yeah, those significant job losses, and obviously you can't take out the Australian car industry without a good opposition making noise about it. I mean, that's what good oppositions do. Obviously, those job figures, a bit concerning to see only part-time jobs being created. Maybe that says something about the nature of modern employment. Also disappointed to see those people no longer looking for work, who've given up, who've disappeared into the welfare system or the like. So obviously that's concerning, but always better to have people in work rather than being laid off by Qantas or Ford or all those companies that have made those major closures over the last few months.
Michael Sukkar, participation rate down, full-time jobs lost. What do you put that down to?
Well, look, the reality is we have inherited a legacy of a below-trend growth economy, 200,000 additional people unemployed from when the former government took over. So there are a number of challenges that we were faced with on day one, and what the PM and the Treasurer have spoken about the whole time is creating the economic circumstances that can ensure that job growth and the assistance of people transitioning out of one job into another is heightened. And look, I would say today's numbers are encouraging, but we're certainly
I'm sure I'll hear the word carbon tax out of this, but when does the government, Michael Sukkar, own the jobs figures? At what point will that happen?
Well, we are the government. We will own every number. Unlike the former government, we won't shirk responsibility. We've inherited a tough task and we are up for the job. But there are a number of micro and macroeconomic reforms that we have been frustrated on in the Senate up until today. Hopefully come 1 July, including repeal of the carbon tax, repeal of the mining tax and others, we'll be able to make some of those reforms to stimulate further job growth. But today's numbers, I suppose, say that we have a resilient economy, and notwithstanding some of the anti-competitive regimes that the former government instituted, that the Australian economy can plough through. But we want to give them a hand up. We want to ensure that people can find that better job if they are in the unfortunate circumstance of losing one job. And that's what we saw in the 90s. That's what both sides of politics prior to the last government sought to foster. So I would just...
We are getting low on time, so I'll move on to one final topic. I'll start with you, sure. Graham Perrett, the former Foreign Minister. Everybody's talking about Bob Carr. Is Labor too beholden to Jewish lobby groups, do you believe, in this delicate policy area?
You certainly, I think the term he used was Israel lobby groups, not Jewish. Let's be clear on that. We're talking about the nation state of Israel. And you're probably asking the very worst person in the caucus. I'm on the record very strongly advocating for more action in terms of looking after the UN territories, and I disagree with some of the comments Foreign Minister Bishop has made about some territories being suddenly magically legal. I believe in a two-state solution, and I don't believe that I'm sort of with Bob Carr on aspects of this, but the Labor Party, that said, the Labor Party's a broad...
But on that aspect, was it your experience or knowledge of this open door, if you like, from Israel lobby groups to be able to be putting such overt pressure on the Prime Minister's office?
Well, they never knocked on my door, and certainly if I had an issue, we always had healthy debates. I've got a lot of friends in the Palestinian lobby group as well, so they were able to knock on doors. That's the reality of politics. You let people come and present their point of view, whether they be a nation state or a group of people. That's what happens, and you then have healthy debates. But I never saw that pressure, but maybe they knew not to knock on my door.
Michael Sukkar, your thoughts on this policy area?
Oh, well, look, Tom, this is just another example of the Labor Party navel-gazing, focusing on themselves, whether it be Bob Carr and his revelations or his at-length discussions about his eating habits whilst travelling, or whether it be pre-selection processes in the Senate, the WA elections for their Senate ticket. It's just another sorry saga of the Labor Party focusing on themselves. Meanwhile, the coalition is focusing on cleaning up.
He's no longer in the
Labor's
parliamentary party, Bob Carr. I know you mentioned there the focus on his diet and his exercise and so on. He's someone, from the brief experience I had, with a fairly healthy sense of humour. Is he taking us all for a ride here and selling a few more books in the process?
Well, I think the more worrying thing, and I speak about that in jest, but the more worrying thing about these so-called memoirs is, does Bob Carr elevate the position of Australian Foreign Minister by breaching confidences of senior people whom we trade with and have diplomatic relationships with? And I don't think he does. And so I would echo the comments of our Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, who has said and emphasised that it's crucially important for Australians who are representing our nation abroad that they can give confidence to those people whom they are having frank and fearless discussions with, that they won't one day find their way onto the front page of a newspaper or in a memoir. And I think that's the more troubling aspect of
Michael, can I agree with Michael? Can I agree with Michael 100% with that last comment, to end on a bipartisan note?
Always good to end on a bipartisan note. Graham Perrett, Michael Sukkar, thank you both for your time today. Thank you for watching Lunchtime Agenda.